What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm starting one of the most challenging phases of becoming a professional pilot as I begin my journey on getting my instrument rating. Every single pilot that I talk to, every time I mention that this is the phase that I'm going into, they all wish me good luck, as I know exactly how challenging this was one of the worst written tests that I had as I was getting prepared for my accelerated flight training. Join me as we push forward on this exciting and extremely challenging part of becoming a professional pilot, instrument rating. So one more thing before we get started. I've noticed that a lot of you have not subscribed to the channel yet who are watching this currently. It's a great free way to support the channel, as well as hitting that like button, getting this message out to more and more people so we can help educate other aviators just like you and me. If you'd like to raise that level of support, I've also just started a Patreon channel as well. Over there, you'll get early access to videos. I also have the opportunity to join me on a live chat and answer any of the questions that you'd like. You'll also be able to vote on upcoming content and tell me exactly what you want to see in the next video. There will also be exclusive content that you can see only on that channel. Now that all the business is out of the way, let's begin. This week is absolutely slammed with things to do. This instrument requires a lot of new learning. It's basically like starting all over again, and then you go back to commercial and you basically take all the stuff that you learned in private and just increase that a little bit. So this really is like learning all over again, because we're going away from visual and ground reference points and those type of things, and looking outside of the cockpit to staring directly inside the cockpit and not being able to use any outside references in order to navigate or aviate the airplane. Today in particular is going to be slammed, as I am looking at a 8:30 ground lesson that should end around 11:30, and then rolling into another ground lesson that'll start at noon. That one will end at about 3 o'clock. And then I have 2 simulator flight lessons that are going from 4 o'clock until 10 o'clock right now. Or maybe 4:30 to 10. But it's going to be about 5.5 to 6 hours in that simulator today. And that's going to wrap up all the sim, as last week I just started this stuff. I got 4.5 hours in the sim last week between 2 sim sessions. And I've gotten in, I would say, 2.5 ground lessons into last week that are coming into this week. So with the amount of grounds that I have today, as well as the sim sessions, it is going to be an absolutely packed day. It's a little bit after 8. That first one, like I said, is going to start up at 8:45, and we're ending at 10 o'clock today. Lots and lots to do. Can't wait to share it all with you. you can tell, it is late, aviators. Just now wrapping up 2 ground lessons and 2 flight sim lessons. So I've been wrapped up in it all day long. The very first ground lesson, we went through some weather. Main difference between this and the private was really selecting an alternate and what that looked like. Considerations for doing that, especially weather considerations, because if you can't land at your initial airport, you probably have some weather that is stopping you from doing that. So then how do you select an appropriate alternate that's far enough away where the weather is probably different and you're within all of the different new FAA regulations as well, but still close enough to where it makes sense. So just figuring those pieces out. The second part of my ground, we switched over, started talking about more departures, what that looked like, as well as stars. So that would be the arrival procedures, kind of back and forth between those two, and then sat down and did emergency procedures, shot 8 different approaches on the sims. Did some with the PFDs missing, some with the MFDs missing. So I'll put up some pictures of what that looked like, and having to now do approaches in different environments, right, under different emergency type situations, lost my alternator, all kinds of different things, right? So got to be prepared for all different situations. Then in the next sim, did a cross country that was different, had some different approaches to it than what I'd just been kind of shooting in the sim. Those few times made it a little bit more interesting. Had to do a paralleled approach coming in, did a circling. So did some different ones than what I had done in the emergency procedure flight. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, I have my first flight in a week scheduled. Be great to get back up in the air for real and not simulated. I am going to crash hard tonight and not set an alarm. Hopefully that'll pan out into some really good sleep and I feel fully recovered and refreshed, ready to attack the flight tomorrow. See you then. It is Wednesday morning, getting prepared for a real big day. Wednesdays are my favorite day at Blue Line. Mostly that's because of Faith Night. As we've gotten further and further along in this adventure, it becomes harder and harder to stay in contact with the same group that I came in through orientation. And they were a big reason early on for my success. Us being able to get together and study and do our grounds together and really kind of push each other further forward has been a really big part of the process. Any instructor worth their salt will tell you it's not just what you do in the classroom with them, it's what you're doing away from that time that really is going to determine your success. And being with them and having those study partners and people that continue to push you outside of that dedicated time is really important. Really looking forward to getting with them tonight. Hopefully, fingers crossed, there will be a few of them there so that way we can all reconnect and continue to push each other and just see how each other are doing again. It's been, I feel like, couple of weeks since I've seen some of them and really been able to connect. So looking forward to that time tonight. As far as the flight training is concerned, I do have 1 flight today. It's scheduled from 1:30 to 5:15 in Flight Scheduler Pro. That means the flight will be around, I would suspect, 2.5 hours or so, as we are probably just going to shoot approaches. I haven't even looked at the syllabus, but that would be my assumption, is just getting used to shooting a handful of approaches at JNX. That being said, to give you a little background of what's led into that, I've got about 9 hours of sim time and about 9 hours of ground time that have been basically a prerequisite preparing me for this flight tonight. It's my understanding that those new 4 simulator flights are kind of new to the syllabus, and as a prereq for this, it really hasn't been, I would say, as exciting, right? Flying the simulator, but I think it's been a critical piece. I don't know how they kind of did it beforehand, but I really believe it's been a critical piece to setting me up for success for this flight, as I feel much more comfortable with the buttons that I'm going to need to push, and not just flying the plane. I mean, in the simulator, yes, you're worried about flying the plane and not crashing, but there's zero consequences if you do that. There's life-changing consequences, right, if you do that in real life. Having that opportunity to kind of get, my instructor calls it buttonology, and I really like that term. Understanding what buttons you need to push, the plates that you need to bring up, what you're going to be looking at, things that you have to take into consideration. I think that's going to be very helpful, even though it wasn't fun to go through. Very helpful now that it's time to do the practical part of flying. Really looking forward to today and the flights and the fellowship. Let's go ahead, jump straight to it. Really good flight today. Did about an hour of ground beforehand, talking about circling approaches as well as lost comms and what to do in that situation, how to make sure that everybody is basically on the same page, even though you don't have a way to communicate by radio anymore. Squawking that 7600 and then what you should do depending on the last conversations that you've had. All really good information. Got up in the air for the first time to do some approaches, did some known power settings, trying to just really catch 100. It was really variable up there today, so my known power settings were kind of all over the place as far as what those speeds ultimately gave me. It was just vastly different than what was actually happening in the air. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you just get this shot of 10 to 15 knots. And that's just what happens whenever you get these warm days, lots of thermals, winds kind of moving around. So those things were a bit challenging. However, pressing the buttons to load the approaches and brief the plates and do all the function of the instrument flying itself, I felt really comfortable with. So that's really good for me, I think, as a sign of my first flight, being ready and prepared. Tomorrow I have 2 flights. That I think is going to be pretty challenging and taxing. There's a lot more to the instrument flying than there was to the pilot flying, even though you were doing maneuvers and all this stuff the whole time. There's even more, right, that kind of gets added to your plate. And really, there's only one right way to do it. You're not feeling it out. You're doing exactly what is required of you in order to master instrument. Those lessons are also going to contain some emergencies. So getting myself prepared for what happens if I have an alternator failure while I'm on an approach, or what happens if my PFD or my MFD or any of these other systems go out. What does that look like? How do you still continue to do your approach even when you're having these emergency situations and you're in IMC conditions? So how do you get out of the clouds and land safely? Really looking forward to seeing how those lessons go tomorrow, and I'll catch you in the AM. Thursday morning, on my way into Blue Line for a 2-flight IFR day. This is going to be pretty challenging if you haven't started your training yet, or you're just investigating it. Most people are doing 1 to 2 flights per week. Fitting in 2 flights in a single day is not only going to be challenging, but probably pretty taxing as well. I remember doing it in my private, and it wasn't too bad. The first go around, it was a little bit much, but there was a few more days that came along where I was doing those 2 flight days and just wasn't nearly as taxing as you kind of got acclimated to it. Really interested to see how this is going to go. Under the foggles and the hood, the IFR flights are just different. than the PPL flights were. And the fact that you could kind of see around and you were doing basic maneuvers and things like that. This is a constant head down briefing, thinking, logging, controlling, and manipulating flight. Like, there's just more things and tasks that you have to do, and it's just going to be a lot more mentally taxing, I think. It looks like a really nice day, and if you are a pilot, you know when it looks really nice, that means it's usually pretty rough air. So we'll see how things are once we get up there. I'll let you know how things go after the first flight. Man, I am so sorry that was a real quick one for you guys with not much happening, but my day was absolutely slammed, so I really didn't have time to get a bunch of video of anything else. Super excited about the way things went today. IFR can be a bit boring. It feels like being in the military. There's a lot of hurry up and wait. So when you have things to do, you need to complete them quickly, and then you sit there for a while waiting on the next thing. Worked on emergency situations and non-precision approaches today over 2 different flights. Did some ground around those as well. Going back tonight, I've got a few things that I need to read up on, kind of continue to keep myself fresh and ready to go. Tomorrow I have 1 flight at 7 a.m. So I'm going to study up, rest up, and catch you in the a.m. Good Friday morning. Today is May 31st, along with being my dad's birthday. Happy birthday, Dad. It is my last day this week at Blue Line, as I'm going to take this weekend off since it is my dad's birthday as well as my wife's birthday on June 3rd. Happy birthday, babe, if you're watching. Along with all those birthdays that are happening, it is also the last day of the current Airman Certificate standards. What does that mean? It means the FAA has updated the ACS, and that takes effect June 1st, 2024. I think the last updates was like 2018 or something like that, as far as like massive ones. If you go and get onto the FAA website, or you can just Google whatever rating you're getting in ACS, so PPL ACS or IFR ACS, you will be able to see, should take you to the government's website, and you can download the brand new standards. It doesn't matter if you discontinued, if you got through the oral portion of your practical test and then went to go fly and couldn't get up, or if you failed your previous check ride, whatever your circumstances are, if you have not completed by today, which you guys are going to see this a little bit later than today, obviously, then you're going to be held to those new standards. So make sure you go to the FAA's website, you get the new standards, or you get your new book that has the updated standards. It's not like everything in the world has changed. They've updated them, right? So there's some small changes here or there that's happened. I think CFI, from what I heard, has the biggest changes that are happening with that one. I would say you're being held to the same standard. However, they just have different ways that they're checking your standard to make sure that you are the super pilot, as John King would say, that you are supposed to be. Your DPEs are going to use these new standards in order to test you when you go in for your practical tests and you're doing your oral and your check ride. So make sure that you're up to date on those. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'll be glad to direct you and get you to the new information. As far as my last day here this week, I have a flight this morning at 7:15. It's about 6:30 right now. Wasn't really able to do as much of my studying as I wanted to beforehand, so I'm going to peek through all my material, get myself ready to go for my flight, and then I've got a ground lesson after, and should wrap up today, having finished the majority, I think, of my ground lessons at this point. And then there are 16 flight lessons, so I'll be halfway through my IFR up to this point at the end of the day today. Try and see if I can get a little bit of footage today of me wearing some foggles, and you can kind of see what that looks like in order to train and do those type of things. One pro tip I will give you, if you're in a DA-40 or something smaller like what I am in, definitely get the foggles and not the hood. That hood really extends out pretty far, and there's just not that much room inside of this DA-40. So definitely get the foggles, I would say. If you're in a Cessna, or something that's a little bit bigger, has a little bit more room inside of the cockpit than these little 40s. You can get the hood if that's what floats your boat. But I would definitely recommend getting the Foggles if you're in the 40. Let's get to the video and you can see it for yourself. That was an absolutely awesome flight. Hope you guys enjoy being able to kind of see the setup and what it feels like, and why it's so important to have the Foggles instead of the hood. My original wrap-up clip actually was filmed in slow-mo, so I'm kind of reshooting it the next week. Want to go ahead and give you that weekly wrap-up, however, now. Big takeaway from this week is I'm through the flight lessons and ground lessons that I was hoping to be through. I'm back on pace of where I want to be to finish at the time that I wanted to finish at. So that's a really big piece of this that I'm really happy with. Got wrapped up with the sims and on into the flying. Let's talk about that time that I've accumulated this week. So for the week, I was able to get in 8.4 hours of actual flight time that counts towards my total time. And I got 7.6 hours of simulated flight time, as well as 15 actual instrument approaches. I had some before that were in the simulator. However, real life flying instrument approaches, I have 15 of them now. So it's really good to start getting those approaches under my belt. Total time is up to 58.3 hours. I've also got 18.6 of instrument time, like simulated instrument time, really logging that super fast. Most of the time, if you guys look it up as you're going to interviews and things like that, and kind of the rule of thumb is about 10% of your flight time being instrument time. However, when you're instrument training, almost all of it is under simulated instrument conditions or actual instrument conditions. The other weird thing that's kind of going on in my logbook currently is that I have more dual receive time than I have actual flight time. You didn't see the other video when I started up my sim time. It is because of the simulator. So in our simulator, we count that towards both instrument time and our dual receive time, but it doesn't count towards our total flight time because of the type of simulator that we use. Understand that the simulator time that you are getting isn't actually going to count towards your kind of flight hours. It does count towards your instrument time as well as your approaches. You can do all these like really important things for currency with it. It just won't count towards your total flight time. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead, do that, click that button below. Click the bell notification so that way you can get updated. So far, I've been pretty good at being able to get everything up Thursdays at 6. That's when our next weekly episode will release. Click that like button if you're enjoying the content. Keep me motivated. Keep pushing these videos out to others so everyone can enjoy. And don't forget to leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you would like to see added. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can do so at bradtakesflight@gmail.com. Best of luck in your flight adventures as you go through your training, and as always, keep the grass off your wingtips, aviators.